Welcome to the Cognitive Crucible, produced by the Information Professionals Association. Our website is information-professionals.org, where you can find links and information about today's conversation and get access to members-only content. Join John Bicknell and explore all aspects of our generational challenge, cognitive security. The Cognitive Crucible is a forum that presents different perspectives and emerging thought leadership related to the information environment. The opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of or endorsement by the Information Professionals Association.
My guest today on the Cognitive Crucible is Lieutenant Colonel Orlandon Howard, who serves as the Public Affairs Officer for the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs and the U.S. Army G1 at the Pentagon. He has previously worked as a Public Affairs Coach Trainer, Public Affairs Operations Officer, Army Brigade Combat Team PAO, Marketing Operations Officer, and as a fellow with the Fleischman Hillard, a New York-based public relations and marketing agency. Orlandon Howard, welcome to the Cognitive Crucible.
Awesome. Thank you, John. I really appreciate being here. Again, I'm a long-term listener of the show, so it's an honor to be here talking with you about this topic.
Yeah, well, we are really looking forward to getting hearing you talk more about a recent piece that you had published in, oh shoot, I'm sorry, I'm not going to get it wrong, or get it right. Is it the Army University Press? Yeah, that's right. So the Army University Press, a piece entitled Communication Strategery. Rethinking Strategic Communication for the U.S. Military Public Affairs. And this came out very recently. We'll have a link to it in the show notes in the September 2025 timeframe. So just within the last couple of weeks. But also just want to let our audience know that Orlandon's opinions are his own and do not reflect any policies for the U.S. Army or any other U.S. government agency for that matter. So before we start talking a little bit more about your article, Orlandon, could we start by getting your assessment of our strategic landscape, or if you prefer, the times in which we live?
Sure, John. The U.S. national security strategy essentially outlines four, major nation state competitors or threats. China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. I know we may have a new national security strategy coming, but I don't imagine it's going to change that much. So the designation of those threats, I think, designate essentially the priorities that tells eventually the military what they need to prepare for, prepare to compete, deter, or fight and win if necessary. And so of that list, China is obviously one of the big rocks in the jar. So and they're considered our pacing threat, and so that telegraphs that they're probably the most formidable threat or competitor of all the nation states. And so if we prepared for that, if we prepared for a contest between China, we'll probably be pretty well prepared to face the other threats. And so, but if I double click on China, I think the likely scenario for any kind of conflict for them seems like that would be over Taiwan. And I know that scenario would involve obviously China giving up on this, warrior diplomacy, or at least furthering it in another way. And then they cross the Taiwan Strait and take Taiwan by force. And now obviously the U.S. has to decide what it wants to do. Now, I'm not here to talk about what the U.S. or even advise what the U.S. should do. I just want to be prepared for the worst case scenario, at least from a military perspective. And that probably would be actually a direct conflict with China to maybe expel them from Taiwan if that's what they did. So now that operation environment is obviously hard enough, right? There's something we call the tyranny of distance, because it's just vast distance between land spaces and between our maybe our capabilities and where the fight might be. And then obviously China has significant anti-access, anti-denial capabilities. So that's a wicked problem. But if you can imagine, the information environment is even more of a wicked problem, because a lot of things contribute to that. Obviously, we have the U.S.'s policy of ambiguity over the recognition of Taiwan's political status. And obviously, the U.S. recognized that Taiwan belonged to China, but obviously, the U.S. prefers the status quo with a de facto
Hmm.
independence of Taiwan. Then you have the coercive power, of China, and there again the wolf warrior diplomacy, and not to mention that there's probably some split opinion in Taiwan about what the status of Taiwan should be. And then you have what you end up talking a lot about. You have a lot of guests on talking about this. There's significant information warfare capabilities
Hmm.
that are happening behind our own lines and are happening obviously from multiple nation states, but particularly China as well. And so if you take all that and then you overlay that over our current contemporary media environment, it has social media, disinformation rife, the environment is rife with disinformation, misinformation, AI, and all the now capabilities that are coming out of that. So if you overlay that, you realize that we got a really significant challenge if we ever had to face this threat. And so I have to ask myself, are we ready to contest from a information, particularly cognitive perspective? Are we ready to contest that effectively? And my assessment is that I don't think so,
Hmm.
because I don't think we have a good enough doctrine that tells us how to win in that kind of information environment just yet. And doctrine, I think, is the center of gravity. Doctrine informs our practice, informs the things that we do, the way we approach things. It informs our gap assessments, where we need to build capabilities, informs our capabilities development, and then ultimately, obviously, informs our tangible investments and resource allocation. So that's
Hmm.
my broad, hopefully that was a
Hmm.
story to tell you what my assessment is and why I assess it that way.
Right. Okay. Wow. Where does the uh, concept of competition or the like infinite game come into your outlook there with China or where we are currently? I mean, we're not in combat at the moment, but like everything's on a continuum. Where does how do you think about competition and maybe even public affairs role in the kind of ongoing competition?
Yeah, so competition, I think you're always in a state of competition. And for me, that means that we should always be in state, that the information capability should always be in a state of competing.
Hmm.
Now, the only question would be the sort of degrees and the amount of sort of resource we got dedicated to the competition, but we should always be competing. And so uh,
Hmm.
I think that begins now. We have still developed um, what winning looks like. We have developed, those kind of objectives to figure out what do we want to accomplish, and that's one. I think what we want to accomplish is we want to continue to maintain a relative advantage in the information,
Hmm.
and we also want to we have a sort of harder requirement, I think, to deter any sort of conflict because nobody wants conflict, and so
Yeah.
when we're operating, during competition, I think we are doing communication strategy to affect to gain relative advantage and to deter and prevent any kind of conflict.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So, all right, getting a little bit more into your article. Again, this is Communication Strategery, Rethinking Strategic Communication for U.S. Military Public Affairs. Link in the show notes. Why did you write this article? What was the need?
Well, poor professional goal. As a public affairs officer with the Army, I've been in public affairs for about 10 years, been in the Army, well, 11 years, been in the Army about 20 years. So I wanted to, I guess, certify myself as a professional. And I thought this may be one way to do it. Obviously, I know I'm doing it on a daily basis, but I wanted to contribute something to the discipline
Hmm.
that was written and it was going to be permanent and it was also going to be well thought out.
Yeah.
And so, and as writing is a rigorous exercise and thinking hard about something and thinking systematically. So that's also I enjoy conducting that exercise. But there was also a strong demand signal, I think, for strategic communication from leaders. A few years back, I had asked the then Army Chief of Public Affairs, what he was hearing about leaders about public affairs, because he would obviously, do sort of battlefield circulation. And I was curious what he was hearing from commanders and other warfighters and other sort of like stakeholders. And I mean, he'd said, and the only thing he said was strategic communication. He said,
Hmm.
leaders want public affairs to move to do more strategic communications. And obviously it has an implication where he's like, well, you get the sense that, okay, what we're doing right now isn't what they want. All right, this traditional way, legacy way is not not what they want. They want something stronger. So then it was a matter of figuring out, what he meant, right, by strategic communication and what anybody means by it. Because you see the
Hmm.
word a lot. People attach it to their titles now. And so I had to go figure out what that meant. You have some sense because there's sort of normal parlance that we accept when we say stuff like that. We know we think we mean like, hey, we need to be more clever, we need to be more aggressive. But I wanted to come up with a harder definition. And that
Hmm.
wasn't easy, by the way, because there's a lot of discussion out there that has sort of eloquently worded definition, but still, I don't think necessarily was a practical um, scope of what exactly you're doing when you're doing strategic communication.
Right. I can only imagine that it is one of those kinds of terms that uh, you can ask 10 different thoughtful practitioners and get t 10 different, slightly different answers as to what strategic communication is.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. No, that's exactly right. And then again, and I like to say that mind prevails, but again, I try to think about it in a systematic way and outline something that I thought it needs to include for the military. And so, but I don't want to necessarily claim a monopoly over it.
Right. Well, do you have a working or the Landon Howard definition of strategic communication? And how do you contrast strategic communication with what people might consider to be legacy public affairs or business as usual?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And so, because again, I focus on practical, so I would say I
Mm-hmm.
said actually for me, strategic communication, and then I might sort of rebrand to communication strategy, but I'm going to use those synonymously.
Mm-hmm.
That equals the PESO model, and so the PESO model is a set of activities that a communicator conducts to essentially drive their message. And so in practicality, that's what it is to me. That you're doing
Mm-hmm.
activities that like advertising, you're doing activities like engaging the media, you're doing activities like posting to your website, and you're doing activities obviously like maintaining a social media campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but still, if I kind of scope out, I would say that's the crux of it. But obviously, all those things need to be directed, toward a goal. And so, communication and strategy slash stratcom to me is going to outline a goal that matters and I think is legitimate, maybe scientifically informed in some kind of way, doing some sort of benchmarking or measurement of the environment that says, I think if we do these things, we will win, and then executing the activities to secure that win.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that for the way you look at strategic communications, the PESO model is a good way of thinking about strategic communication. And by the way, in your paper, so I would suggest to uh, folks in the audience who are interested to understand this a little bit better, either hit pause or go to the link, and you've got a nice figure in there, figure two, which depicts the PESO model. And the PESO is an acronym that stands for paid media, earned, shared media, owned media. Do you think maybe you could take a moment or two to sketch out what this model is, how long it's been around, I mean, just talk about this a little bit more and then relate it back to strategic communications, or like you also say in your piece, the integrated communication strategy.
Okay. Yeah, no, definitely, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that. So, to answer, I guess also as part of your last question,
Uh-huh.
hey, what's different than public affairs? And I would
Yeah,
say,
yeah, yeah.
I think the introducing this PESO model makes it different than traditional public affairs. We don't use this term. I think in our public affairs doctrine now, and we don't even use it necessarily in our everyday language. But I've found this model, I think, several years back. I'm not sure exactly how old it is, and invented by a woman named Jeannie Dietrich that owns, I think, a company called Spin Sucks. So since she's just a sort of master public relations person that, figured out that, hey, if we wanted to sort of scope, what we do and what we offer, probably as a public relations firm or a public relation capability, we think this is probably a great way to outline that. And so that's why I think it works for public affairs too. Like often we need a little more transparency on what people can expect from us, and then what we can expect, obviously, from each other. So if somebody asks me, "Hey, what's our plan?" I can essentially say, my plan is PESO. I'm going to execute a number of activities repeatedly, invariably, and aggressively to get our message out and get folks to think, believe, and behave the way that supports our objectives. And so, again, I feel like this was just a ready framework, and I just love frameworks. And so I was immediately drawn to it because it just overlaid the activities that I would expect to put in a plan to execute my public affairs. And so in public affairs, Army public affairs too, we talk about a sort of scheme of public affairs. And that, again, that's a set of, I think, activities that we're conducting in a sequence that point to or directed toward our objective. So I would encourage anyone any communicator to adopt this framework because it organizes, I think, organizes our thoughts and then organizes our operations, as it were. And so I got really exposed to it when I did a master program with West Virginia University, and that program was integrated marketing communications. And so for them, integrated marketing communication basically equaled PESO.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you could unpack for our audience the components of the PESO model, just so people have a better idea of what it is?
Yes, no, definitely. And I realize that they can't see the model, so they have to hear from me.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Thanks for jogging that. So P stands for paid in peso. Paid are activities that you pay for to get your message, I think, into place and time that you want it to be, and in front of the people that you want it to be. So paid can include advertising. It might also include events. So those are things that you're going to have a budget for to execute, but they predictably or allow you to predictably place or place your message. And so I think that's a key part of the strategy. A second thing is the earn. That the E stands for earn media. And so earned media are going to be media that you actually earn. And so a lot of times that's either pitching to media who acts as a third party endorsement, or the opposite of whatever your news is, or whatever your announcement is. And so that's somebody who is acting on your behalf to talk about what you want to talk about. And so that can be media, traditional media as we know it, but that can also be something like reviews online. Reviews online are earned media. You can't buy those really, or you can't ethically buy those. And so
Mm-hmm.
you really do have to earn it. So that's what earn means. And so shared has been somewhat debatable on whether or not that belonged. I still like it because it refers to platforms that you share. Social
Mm-hmm.
media actually counts as a platform that you share because you don't own it. And so I think it still matters because some of those platforms began to change the rules. Folks might remember when social media first started out and everybody started getting on there and promoting things. You could post something and you can get you can get a lot of reach, but
Mm-hmm.
now there's walls up, and so now you really kind of have to pay to play to get your message out. And so when those kind of rules change, those algorithms change, that changes. That has to change what you do. And so you still have to be there, but you got to understand, hey, that's a shared platform. You don't own it. And so you might have to abide by the rules. And so that might also point to like why you might need to actually focus on a lot of resources on the next acronym letter, which is owned. O for is
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
owned are properties, that platform that you own. It may be it can even be your sort of email distro list or email marketing is, I think, is still considered owned. If you can host your own podcast, that can be a own platform. Your website is probably actually one of your more flagship um, offerings that belong in this category, where you're going to be able to put your message where you want it, and in a way that you want it, and you'll be able to control it. And so that's the PESO model, not necessarily in a nutshell, but hopefully in a small or medium to large nutshell.
Right, right. And so, bringing this back up to strategic communications, uh, lens, the PESO model helps public affairs practitioners like understand a more like holistic way of like I don't know, or thoughtfully engaging or different aspects of message and content uh, dissemination across an information environment. Would you say that that's fair?
No, that's exactly it. I love the word holistic. That's the point of it. It's to create really a sort of wraparound set of activities that again drive the message from all angles and again multiple places. And so that I think that's key, a key component of this idea.
Right. You also have make a point in your piece. You've got a nice example about integrative messaging, and you give like an example for a commercial airline. Do you think you could unpack that a little bit more for the audience?
Right. Okay. Um, So the concept that I'm proposing is called integrated communication strategy. And I think I told you what
Hmm.
communication strategy mostly. And the integrated piece is attached to the name intentionally because I think it's a key component. It sort of signposts exactly what you have to do because all the other stuff will fail if it's not integrated. And so I said everything needs to be integrated at least three areas, and that's communication, messaging, communication, integrating the messages, integrating the actors, and integrating the activities. And so this diagram that John mentioned is a diagram when I'm integrating messages. Okay, and the example is that because what the problem I'm solving is I said that many times we develop messaging that's only one-sided, it's unilateral, it's thought up by us, usually it's probably defensive or Pollyannish or
Hmm.
just not fit for purpose when it comes to affecting other people. And so I said we need to integrate uh, our sort of desires and our sort of value proposition with what the target audience or what the customer wants. And so this diagram basically lists our value propositions on the left, the company's value propositions on the left, and then it lists the desires of the customer on
Hmm.
the right. And then the key is to find the overlap. Where do our value propositions overlap with the desires of the customers and priorities of the customers? And then once you find those overlap, that becomes the content of the messaging. One example is I said at Boeing has a, let's say, a robust maintenance program, and that's obviously critical when you're selling airplanes because you're going to keep them a long time, and obviously they're going to have maintenance requirements. And so um, if they have a strong maintenance program, the customer's obviously looking for a strong maintenance program, but it has to obviously be, it can't be too expensive. And so if you put those two together, you might come up with a quick message and say, obviously Boeing offers world-class maintenance, at an affordable price. Now, when the price is high, they may not say affordable price, but that just kind of gives you the idea.
Hmm. Right. Well, so can you like take that commercial airline example and then just like I don't know, you were talking earlier about China and Taiwan, but like I don't know, take it to like a like USERPAC, U.S. Army Forces Pacific, but take it to like a different kind of uh, or like a more of an operationally relevant use case. So like um, in your example in the article, you're talking about the commercial airlines value proposition, what the customer wants or the customer needs and finding like a message that overlaps between the value prop and the customer's desires. So if you're the operational public affairs officer for a combatant command or a army, or it doesn't matter, military unit within a combatant command, um, who winds up being the customer in that strategic communications scenario? Or maybe that's not like a, there's not just one answer to that question. Maybe there's like, it kind of depends. That it could be multiple customers. I guess, sorry, a roundabout way of asking, in the world of public affairs, like operational public affairs, what what kinds of stakeholders wind up being like the public affairs customer in this strategic communication um, framework that you're articulating?
Yeah, I think very, very perceptive that yeah, there's going to be multiple stakeholders, and so we would definitely have to prioritize, what stakeholders matters most in this case. And so, uh, and again, I accept that we can't kind of consider them as a sort of customer, as it were. But yeah, I would
Sure,
say
sure. Yeah.
over Taiwan, I would say I think the Taiwanese people are going to be one of the most significant stakeholders in that contest, and
Hmm.
so what they think matters. And so I definitely, I love it, a phrase that H.R. McMaster uses, which is like strategic empathy. And so
Mm.
if I'm looking at the Taiwan people, and we're thinking about, hey, what do we need them to do? That helps us in our, let's say, in their own interest, obviously, and in the U.S. interest. And that might be, hey, we need them to be fervent about defending their homeland. But right now, looks like some research showing like a little less than 50% of Taiwanese um, support independence. Uh,
Mm.
but still, most people actually just want status quo. Like more than 60% of people just want status quo. But if you ask them between the independence and subjugation by China, they're going to choose independence. But
Hmm.
that could change, right? When the when the bombs start flying, right? And so
Mm. Right.
folks are going to start falling in different camps. And so if I were looking at, and again, if I were to conducting this exercise, I would say, ask myself, hey, what if I'm a Taiwanese person, I'm in that 48%, like what's my situation? What am I thinking? And I think a lot of folks just want the conflict to stop. They don't want to be in danger more. They want to go back to the status quo, and so they're going to be asking themselves like, hey, which way, what's the speediest way for me to get there? Now it could be that hey, we just accept China's sort of governance of us, in a more hands-on way, or we do fight for our independence or to maintain our independence. And so that's the first part. So I'd put that on the right. Hey, the Taiwanese person wants the conflict to end quickly, right? And he
So,
wants, go ahead.
so yeah, so during a public affairs uh, campaign, like so it's feasible that a operational campaign uh, from public affairs would be that the Taiwanese people are uh, the intended audience for a campaign, right? Could it also be just as feasible that a public affairs campaign could be the uh, home front, the families of service members that are back either stateside or if they're in Hawaii, that could also be an audience. So like there's could be like multiple campaigns that have different audiences, I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
Yep. No, 100%. We typically break those out in three. You have the host nation, which obviously be the
Hmm.
Taiwanese people. Then you
Okay.
have the international community because they
Mm.
matter too. Their voices matter a lot. And then you have your domestic audience.
Hmm.
And so we do have to be, walking and chewing gum at the same time. So we'll have to address those audiences, I would think, simultaneously, but still some may have to be prioritized more than others, particularly at different phases of the conflict and where the most risks are. But I would say definitely we still would probably initially, in let's say phase one, we probably need to focus on the Taiwanese people and then probably the international community
Hmm.
because they're going to enable us and the Taiwanese people, people to engage, let's say in a robust way, and they're going to be enablers or they're going to be detractors. And so I would prioritize them, but clearly it may be the purview of the political figures to exercise their leadership and also do their sort of stratcom for the American public if they think that's what we ought to be doing.
Right. So, if you don't know the answer to this, just let me know. But so again, if you're the public affairs um, capability for USERPAC, U.S. Army Forces Pacific, um, would that public affairs shop or the public affairs capability for the entire command periodically would would you likely be engaging with all three of those um, uh, audiences? The host nation audience in this example, it's Taiwan, but if it's I don't know if you're doing what exercise like what Cobra Gold, that might be what South Korea or something like this. Maybe I'm getting that wrong, uh, but might you guys be engaging at any given time with the host nation audience, the international audience, and the what did you call it? The homeland audience?
Yeah, so domestic audience.
Domestic audience, yeah. I guess what I'm trying to understand a little bit better are those audience missions um, uh, given to other public affairs units or capabilities outside of the like geographic uh, or the component command, if you will.
Yes, yes, definitely. I appreciate you breaking out that 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 uh, that question because that does raise the point that again we do have capabilities in different areas and we
Hmm.
should have a sort of defense in depth or an offense in
Hmm.
depth. And so yes, your forward element might be focused on host nation, and that also doesn't mean that we don't have sort of reach back
Hmm.
capabilities
Hmm.
doing the same thing. But definitely we can designate other public affairs elements to focus on priority audiences and furthering those messages. So yes, that would definitely be happening. We do have a diffuse public affairs enterprise, right? Like public affairs officers are in every major command, all the way, from it used to be a brigade combat team, brigade level, but definitely at the division level, and we fight as a division now. The Army does. All the way up the chain, they have public affairs officers, and yes, they can be
Hmm.
dedicated to whatever lane we give them to
Yeah.
support.
Yeah. So this article just came out a couple of weeks ago. What's the reception been? Have you gotten feedback from the community?
Yes, definitely. I got a lot of good feedback, so I think a pretty good reception. I think most people, not most people, but some people have told me that they've shared this paradigm with their commands because they appreciate that it gives them a framework on how to approach communicating, and that also really offers them and their bosses a little bit of transparency about what kind of things they can be doing to furthering the message. So that's and then I mean that's been good feedback, and other folks
Hmm.
have just been happy to get this discussion out in a
Yeah.
sort of more rigorous way, in a defined way. Some of the I say more neutral feedback has been folks cautioning against trying to connect the reputational problems that the U.S. or the U.S. military had in Iraq with public affairs which I think I'm mostly careful not to do, not to try to draw a straight line to say, hey, the problem we had in Iraq was solely the fault of public affairs. But I did overlay it in the context
Hmm.
that we did seem to have problems with strategic communication, at least according to Donald Rumsfeld at the time. But I would never say that Iraq was a communication problem any more than Vietnam was a communication problem. And that's obviously an ongoing debate, like what caused the problems in Vietnam. But the more I think critical feedback that I've gotten is my approach seems to apparently blur the lines between psyop and public affairs.
Oh, really?
Yes, yeah, I think I don't know because I would say obviously the PESO does not blur lines with public affairs. PESO is just a set of activities that are not necessarily benign,
Hmm.
um, aren't sort of strongly influenced because it really I mean strong have a strong influence bent. So yeah, some folks think that I might be trying to move into influence. I'm trying to move
Oh,
as a
oh, I see. Yeah, yeah. I mean, something that I've heard, uh, or something I've learned, I guess, about public affairs, and I haven't heard you say this during our discussion so far, but I've heard public affairs officials um, be really conscious to say, our mission is to inform, right? We have the inform mission, and I think that they're careful to, not use the word influence. Maybe I don't quite, I mean, there's probably people being like, no, 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 that's not right. But anyway, but I do think that the inform portion of the public affairs mission is maybe starts touching on some of what you were just describing. And so the peso model is trying to illuminate, well, how can we uh, engage? We might put out some paid um, messaging on social media, Facebook or something, right? The Army has this, cool exercise that's getting ready to happen, or it's an important exercise that's getting ready to happen, right? Let's put it out on social media, and we're going to pay a little bit of money to, help, that message get out further into the world, right? And then if that gets picked up organically or picked up by others and others start sharing it and so on and so forth. Hey, that's great, right? Awesome. Uh, but hang on a second. Is this starting to get into the influence space? Is that kind of the challenge, or you're trying to kind of like balance all of that?
yes, exactly, exactly. So that yeah, that is the crux of it. So there's at least two components to the paradigm, inform and influence, right now. Yeah, and do get the sense that the expectation of a lot of folks is that public affairs just fall squarely into inform, and then psyop, or even if there's a similar capability, does the influence. And because we do have right now current policy, that says that the military forces particularly can't conduct, let's say, psyop on American folks. You can in foreign theaters, but you can't on American soil. And so sometimes that just seems to translate, hey, into a prohibition against influence, um, particularly on the U.S. But then I think it kind of ends up blurring the lines, and folks begin to think that public affairs shouldn't have anything to do with influence. And yeah, obviously, I think my position is, and I think these folks, this critical feedback, I think they're spot on actually. That I do intend to blur the lines. I don't see that we can or should demarcate those that in such a hard way, because public affairs, and you have laymen that'll say this, like informing has influence effects.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and so you can have it'd be difficult to say at any point in time that I make a decision to communicate or to inform that I don't have in the back of my mind some intent to influence how you think, um, or act in response to what I'm saying. So again, I accept that critical feedback, and I don't see necessarily a reason to go a different direction. I think this is a direction that public affairs should go, and I think it is ethically permissible, and I think actually the policy may also permit it, either lack thereof, any sort of proscriptions against it, or I would request that we change the policy where it restricts us unnecessarily.
Okay. Well, uh, that that makes a lot of sense to me. I understand the desire to keep keep things separate, or to very carefully, try to, define what it means, what public affairs means, and to try to retain that, historical charter, right, of informing. But at the same time, I think, like you just said, Landon, it is impossible, I think, to put stuff out, just even a press release about an exercise, or a press release about service member doing something noteworthy in the community, right? I mean, there is an influence aspect to that, which is, just can't be denied. And so, how do you you know, structure all of that, or how do you walk these different lines? So no, I think that your piece really does a great job of, pushing this conversation to the forefront. And so I would encourage anybody who finds this topic space um, um, interesting, to reach out to Landon, and you guys can continue the conversation. I'd like to, close down, if we may, Landon, ask a couple of typical questions. So, as you know, we have students and researchers who listen to this podcast. Could you suggest a research question that somebody might examine that could maybe, take a scratch at some of this stuff that you've been talking about?
Okay, sure thing. Uh, so one problem I want to solve, I feel like developing objectives and criteria of winning is one of the really most difficult parts of this
Hmm.
enterprise. I think getting activities, you can do that. You got a menu, you can sort that out pretty quickly. But figuring out what exactly we need to accomplish to support the war fighters or the operational objective, that's really difficult. And so my research question asks, what cognitive conditions in history, in different conflicts, what cognitive conditions typically exist among host nation populations that are associated with prevalent support for foreign military aims and operations. And so what I mean by that is, hey, what has to exist, particularly in the minds of folks that we can measure, whether that's through surveys, what typically exists in history that has supported the uh, achievement of a military's objective on foreign soil. And so that's kind of, I think, insight we need in public affairs, and probably even PSYOP, that we need to know, like, what metrics do we need to designate? Where do we need to benchmark to figure out where we need to focus to win?
Mm, right. It it dawns on me as well that, one of Commander's critical um, tasks is setting the theater, and maintaining the theater for favorable U.S. and coalition joint operations, right? And so this your research question, I think, can be looked at from that perspective as well, right? Understanding, what support currently exists, how do you characterize that support for, U.S. Presence within the theater, and then how can we continue to shape that in order to ultimately set the theater, or maintain the theater for joint operations. Would you say that's a fair way of looking at that?
Yes, no, I think that's exactly right. And just to give an example, with when was there's some experts that try to predict who can win the president. Some actually people do it pretty well, and they have these metrics that they use to predict who is most likely to win the president. They'll measure what the economy looks like. They'll measure
Mm-hmm.
employment, social sentiment, and those kind of things. So those are kind of metrics. I think not necessarily precisely, but I need metrics like that to tell me so I can predict. What kind of conditions need to exist for us to have favorable, as you said, conditions to win
Mm-hmm.
in theater or achieve our objectives.
Yeah, yeah. All right, cool. And then lastly, do you have a book suggestion for the audience?
Yes, it may not help my case here, but the title of it is called Propaganda.
Okay. Yeah.
The Formation of Men's Attitudes by Jacques Ellul. Excuse me, obviously my French. It's a French author, and so
Okay.
if I mispronounce that, but I think it's Jacques Ellul, Ellul is the last name, and so I love his book because it actually tells me where the lines are. And there's another book that's labeled Propaganda called Eric Benet's. Eric Benet's, I think, ends up saying that, hey, everybody does propaganda, and so it's
Mm.
okay. But I think this guy actually shows where the lines are. He makes a case, and I don't know if it's right, but he says only nation states can actually do propaganda, and the point of him is that propaganda is really a sort of wraparound and enterprise of communication. From You'll see it in movies, you'll see it in all kind of communications, just like probably the U.S. did in World War II. That's what propaganda is, and so that helps me say, hey, I can avoid that. If I avoid that, then I'm not crossing the line.
All right, Landon Howard, thank you so much for being a guest on the Cognitive Crucible.
Thank you, sir. Been awesome.
The Cognitive Crucible is the only podcast dedicated to increasing interdisciplinary collaboration between information operations practitioners, scholars, and policymakers. To find out more about the Information Professionals Association, visit us at information-professionals.org. Please support our podcast by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review.